And- All right, welcome to the Uncommon Sense podcast. I am your host, Blake, and today I have a very special guest, a man that I followed online for a long time, who I've known through friend of friends, kind of. He doesn't know me, but I know him. The tattooed graffiti specialist, skateboarder, used to be one of the homies on the street. Now, Deputy Mayor of Montreal, Mr. Sterling Downey. How are you, sir?
Good, and still one of the homies on the street, I'd like to believe.
Of course, always. With that beard, for sure, 100%. Wearing that LRG shirt, 100%. There's no way you're not.
Old school LRG, 2002, baby.
I feel you, but hey, it still looks good. That's all that matters, right?
That's it.
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit before I started recording, but yeah, I've wanted to talk to you for a long time, just because I'm not in politics, but like it's one of those things. I think as you were stating before, as you grow older, I think you avoid politics at all costs when you're young, because you feel like, that just all these people talking about stuff that doesn't pertain to you, it doesn't matter, whatever. I'm just out here doing things. They're just not doing anything, but they're setting up the social structure as to how we're navigating the planet. As I've gotten older, like politics has just been something that basically just won't go away. And especially since like we're filming this on January 7th of 2021, but especially what happened yesterday and somewhat today of what happened in the US. And just even yesterday announcing Legault announcing the lockdowns. Unfortunately, COVID has made it so that we can't avoid politics at all anymore. I think everybody is getting like this dose of like, even if you hated politics before and you never wanted to deal with it, you have no choice but to deal with it now, because there's a lot of things that are going on, and a lot of like all of us are sitting now around our TVs like it's like 1975 again at the 6 o'clock news, waiting to hear somebody talk and tell us like the state of the world and what's going on. And there's really nobody else who I really wanted to talk to but you, because I always felt like, just knowing you through people, that you would give me, you'd be as honest as you possibly could, and you'd also, lay it out the way that it actually is. And so I just really want to I thank you and appreciate you, taking the time to, come and talk and chat and really kind of, just shoot the shit and tell me,
It's me who thanks you for having me. Like I said, this is the kind of conversation that's important to have. The other stuff, the what's the word I'm looking for? The polished kind of prepared conversation that happens in politics a lot. The contrived messaging and all of that is something that I've always tried to steer away from. And I think luckily, because I entered politics at the age of 40 as an adult and already extremely established in the other stuff I was doing in the street, like you said, the old adage there, you can't teach an old dog new tricks, is kind of the thing. It's like, you're not going to really change who I am as a person now, because I got to where I am in my life being who I am. I don't need to be someone else. So I hope that I can always, like I said, with certain responsibilities in politics comes responsibilities in terms of what you can and can't say, or what you should or shouldn't say. And a good example of that is what's going on in the US, for example. Trump may have his own personal opinions. He may have his own views, and that's great, that they belong to him, and that's his problem. But as the leader of a state or of a country, a superpower, you no longer have that privilege to just spew whatever you want out of your mouth. You represent the people. You speak on behalf and for the people. Not necessarily 100% of the people. You speak for a group of the population. Obviously, you obviously speak to your base, or the people who support you, to a degree.
Of course.
But regardless of that, you still have to protect and serve the other people, whether they elected you or not, whether they represent you or not, whether they challenge you and attack you or not. You are their leader, and you're in a role of leadership, and you just can't always say whatever you want off the cuff. And it's not because you're a puppet, and it's not because you're being controlled, and it's not because you're lying. It's because of, if you take that responsibility seriously and you realize that when I speak, the people who elected me need me to be there for them. And if I do something stupid and I'm no longer there for them, then they no longer have representation. So that responsibility is such a great responsibility that you have to be careful how you approach and how you say things. But I always try to be me, because at the end of the day, people elected Sterling Downey. People knew who Sterling Downey was. People knew what my background and my history was. I wear all of my past on my sleeve. It's not a secret. And people know that about me, and they know what I've done with my past and what I do with my life experience, and how I've done positive things with it, or balanced it, if you will. So there's no real reason for me to hide anything. And it goes back to what we were saying before about accountability and responsibility. I learned at a very young age, being a troublemaker and getting into trouble, that there is consequence to actions. And if you're not willing to assume the consequence or take responsibility for the action, then you better not do it. If you're going to stand in in front of an authority and provoke that authority and poke the lion and it bites you, well, you have to understand that it can happen. So you're there and you do it. And it's the same thing in anything we do in the world. And it really pisses me off when people try to come up with excuses for their actions rather than taking responsibility for their actions. And again, you can do something completely wrong and just take ownership for it, and take sincere ownership and want to move past it and move forward. But if you're not sincere with yourself, and then not sincere with the people that you're talking to, then your possibility of changing or evolving or learning from that experience is never going to happen.
Right.
So like I said, there's nothing to be ashamed of. We're human beings. We make mistakes. We're not perfect. We do stupid things. We react emotionally and all this stuff. And we make bad decisions. The difference is, do we learn from any of that? And do we evolve? And do we share that experience with other people so they can better themselves? How do we pay it forward, and how do we do something good with it rather than just negative? And what we're seeing now around the world is just, I mean, honestly, I'm glad we're doing this today. And it's kind of, everything happens for a reason. It didn't work out before, and we didn't have a chance to do it.
Oh, yeah, because it's too busy. It's too crazy.
Well, it's too busy, too crazy. But now's probably the most important time to be talking about. Because I'll tell you, as a person who's a public figure and a politician, and most of the time, I'm really honored and privileged and proud of how I've arrived at where I have, and hopefully it inspires other people to do this if they want to. Like I said, with a high school education, with a background like me, without that silver spoon in their mouth, and without the education necessarily, but self-educated. We can accomplish great things. But I don't know now if I would really, currently in the current climate of politics globally, I don't know if I'd want to encourage any young people to get involved in politics. Like,
it's scary now.
I've spent my life encouraging people, and even my career over 7 years in politics, encouraging young people to get engaged and involved, because at 18 you can be elected. But I don't know if you want to be elected. Like, I don't know if I want to subject anyone to this crap now.
Yeah, and that's something I did want to talk to you about, because this is a really weird time in the world where it's like, it feels like enemy number one is politicians and police officers.
Yep.
Like, these are two professions that are coming under the most fire. And granted, there's been, when you talk about political corruption, when you talk about a lot of things going on, I think people are just kind of like, I think people kind of always put the wool over their eyes and say, like, you know what, shit's going wrong, whatever. Yeah, it's, politics is corrupt and whatever, and it's part of the thing. No, one party is no better than the next, and it's all just going to be a bunch of scammers going in, going out. But now with the way that everything is, and the fact that, like, politicians are put in a position, like Legault is now basically told us yesterday, like, okay, there is now a province-wide curfew after 8 p.m. You are not supposed to be outside unless you are doing something, walking your dog, going to get something that's a necessity, so on and so forth, right? Like, and just dealing with, even back to when I first started thinking about, I wonder what Sterling thinks about this, when right before Christmas time, when Plante came out and said that we're going to keep some stores open, but we're going to close these little shops down. There was a time where, and I've said this across multiple podcasts, where I'm like, I don't, and you don't have to talk about this as far as your political stance and stuff. Like, I don't want to get you in trouble for this or whatever. But for me, the way I always looked at it was big corporations like, Walmarts and Best Buys and all these kind of things. Like, the thing is, even if they all close down tomorrow, they could all come back next week. Absolutely. Like that, they've got multi-global. You're not worried. Like, if they disappear, they're going to reappear. That's just what it is.
We need them more than they need us.
That's exactly it. But for me, what kind of was crazy for me is that we're allowing all these big box stores to stay open. But for me, it's like those, the little mom and pop shops, like the Depeners that I'm seeing on the corner, the shops that my friends own. Like, I got a couple of friends who own restaurants, and they're on like the brink of like, we're not going to be able to afford to keep our doors open. But McDonald's can stay open and Burger King can stay open. You know what I mean? But I'm sitting here trying to do my thing, and I've spent thousands of dollars in doing all this stuff. And I like, the first thought is like, fucking, they're always doing stupid shit. But then I started thinking, because like I said, I've been following you and thinking about you, and like, you've been a very open public figure on, on your social media and stuff. And, you've pretty much always said exactly what you meant. And I was just like, I wonder what it's like for him, because feeling like I know you, like, where, you fight for the small guy and you've been the small guy. So like, you've always kind of kept your grassroots close to your heart. Like, I wonder what it's like to be in that position where, you're a homie, but you're dealing with powers and stuff that it's like, now we're talking about, citywide. What do we keep open? What do we close? How do we do this? What do we do that? Like, you have to follow obviously what the province tells you. But I mean, there's still a lot of governing within the city.
Well, that's an interesting thing, right? Because, like you said before, like, it's not the mayor of the city of Montreal makes that decision. As a political body, as a municipal administration, by law, we cannot go against a provincial decree. It's above us. And the same thing with a federal, right? If somebody imposed something on Canada, then the provinces would have to follow certain things. The provinces have a different type of legislative power. They could oppose certain things. There's mechanisms to do that. But municipalities are the closest to the people, obviously. Yeah. And we deal with the day-to-day stuff, like the garbage collection, making sure the grass is cut in a park, plowing the snow, we'll say, for example. But when it comes to a store being open or closed, we have no legislative power. I can't tell a store owner, there's nothing in the law that says that I can tell a store to be open or not. What I can do is I can revoke a permit for somebody to open a store if the zoning of that area doesn't permit the operation of that type of business. But even that power is given to me by the province to legislate that. So, and it could be taken away. So it's not like it's a given. It's not like it's a guaranteed city power. The problem is, we're left trying to, in a lot of cases, in this pandemic is a really good example, because there's no playbook for this. There really isn't. When I was elected in 2013 and then reelected in 2017, if somebody would have asked me, in your next mandate or whatever, within the time that you'll be involved in politics, do you ever expect to manage a crisis or anything? I mean, there were moments when there were acts of terrorism happening or things going on in Toronto, and vehicles in France, bombings in clubs. My greatest fear was I might have to deal with a situation in the city where something horrible like that happens, and I'll be in office and I'll witness that. It's people will lose their lives, and what happens? And that was my biggest fear.
Right.
A lockdown or something like that, I never thought about. I had to deal, with festivals. We had to deal with anti-terrorism measures so that a vehicle couldn't drive through a crowd. But all of that stuff, it's logical when you think about it. You're like, well, this makes sense. I'm going to protect these festival goers. I'm going to protect these people. Obviously, we're going to do that. And no one really argues with that. But when it comes to a lockdown or something like that, it's a complete. It's hard to fathom in a certain way. What's funny with me, and I'll lend a little bit of humor to the situation, even though it's not a laughable situation. But I mean, it's not like it's the first time that I've ever had a curfew. I've had court mandated curfews. So like I said that to somebody yesterday. I said, like, I've had court mandated curfews where for a year I wasn't allowed out in between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And I had those things overturned because I was working a night shift or certain things. So like I found ways legally within my rights to counter those court ordered mandates. And it was funny because a lot of times it was due to graffiti or being arrested or being, you know, during the process of while the court hearings were going on to see if we were guilty or not. During that period of time, you had all these measures put in place that you had to respect. So I'm kind of like used to that, and I'm just kind of like, back then I figured out ways around it intelligently and responsibly and respectfully, if you will. So, you know, if you tell me I have to wear a mask, or if you tell me I have a curfew and it's for the greater good of everybody, I might not agree with it. I might not be happy about it. It might be very disruptive to my life. It may be shitty for my mental health. There's a lot of things. But I can pull together and do it if I have to. Again, also in a position of leadership, it helps because I have a responsibility to set an example to a certain degree.
Correct. Yeah.
But again, not necessarily just follow blindly. I can challenge and question the measures, but I can do that while going along with it. It doesn't mean just because I go along with the measures that I succumb to something being imposed on me. You know, so
let me ask you something. So when these anti-mask protests go on, right?
Yep.
And so you guys are, I like, that's what, and this is what I want to find out, right? So like you guys are the acting governing body for Montreal. You guys are doing your thing. You're just trying to follow provincial standards as what they're telling you to do. You're trying to follow medical standards as to what, like, you know, all the specialists are saying, like, listen, this is just what we got to do. And then listen, personally for me, I don't get it. I don't understand. Like, I can understand to a certain respect that you don't believe the virus is as bad as they say it is. That's your prerogative. You can believe whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like the whole anti-mask, we're not doing this, like, argue against government. And no, you were an anti-establishment guy beforehand. Yeah. But it's like, I can understand hating government. I can understand, you know, like thinking government is all evil and blah, blah, blah. But what I can't comprehend is there's literally something here, this pathogen that has no brain, no bias, no nothing. It does not care whether you wear a mask or not. It doesn't care the color of your skin, the language you speak, whatever it is.
Your age, anything, yeah.
That's it. And here are a bunch of people who, like, we're literally like, look, just put a mask on. Like, if you don't believe in the shit, fine. But just for the smallest, littlest thing we could ask you to do.
For the person next to you, not for yourself. Exactly.
That's it. Just put a fucking mask on so the 60-year-old woman who's retired is not going to die when she goes home.
Or at least feel safe. Or at least feels safe and feels respected and feels like people actually care.
That's it.
Well, look, it's funny because when we talk about this, I'm going to use a really, I don't know if it's a really weird analogy, but let's take it as it is. But, you know, in 2013 to 20, just before 2013, before I was elected in 2013, you had the student you had the student mobilizations. So you had the Les Carrés Rouges. No, which is good. It's important. They were important mobilizations. But the city at the time came in, and this is before I was elected, and before my colleagues, or before Mayor Plante was elected, or any of us.
Yeah.
So the administration at the time comes in with a law, this municipal law called P6, which is you're not allowed to cover your face in a riot or hide your face or in a protest. So, and this was deemed eventually non-constitutional. Like, I mean, you can't stop. So what's ironic is people were fighting for the right to wear masks and fighting against the police and against authorities, and were going out of their houses saying, I'll do whatever the hell I want. I'll wear a mask, and you can friggin' arrest me if you want, but I'm wearing this mask, and that's it, that's all, and I'm going to do this. And then that gets overturned. Then we get into a debate in my first year of elections where we're talking about the Projet de loi 21. And religious communities not being allowed to cover their faces.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was about to bring up. And then there was the whole thing about
so then there's this whole thing about you can't cover your face, you can't be a civil servant or a public worker or a healthcare worker or something and have anything hiding your face. And then that comes into law.
Sterling, I got into a debate with someone about this because they were like, someone was telling me that they were like, well, it's we live in Quebec, and like if I want to, you got to have identity. Like, what if you're doing this and that? I was like, listen, dude, let me ask you a question. You're on a bed, you're sick as fuck. There's doctors, like whatever. A doctor walks in wearing a full-on shawl. She's the best doctor in the freaking world, but she's whatever religion she is. Yeah. Her face is completely covered.
Yeah, could be somebody wearing a kippah, anything. Who cares what your
religion?
That's it.
Exactly. But she can diagnose you, help you, make you healthy. Are you going to tell me that you are not going to accept her help because she's wearing something over her face? Like, are you like? Is that really? Does that piece of cloth really dictate your life or death scenario? Like, that's really what's important to you right now? Well, like, if someone's breaking into your home and they're going to kill you, a cop walks in with a hijab. Are you really going to tell him to get out of your house because he's wearing a hijab?
Well, this is like if you're traveling, let's say the world was, well, I don't know what normal is anymore. I don't even know if the normal existed before now. Like, when you reflect on what the past was, I don't even know if that normal was normal. But let's say I'm traveling to a foreign country on vacation for whatever reason. I'm traveling. It could be the United Arab Emirates. It could be Saudi Arabia. You name it. I could be in Iraq, Afghanistan. I could be anywhere on a humanitarian mission. You name it. Just traveling the globe and growing as a person.
Right.
And I could enter a very Muslim country or whatever the country. I could be in Jerusalem or you name it. Palestine, I don't care. And something happens to me, or there's a terrorist attack, or there's a bombing, or something. The police who come in, I don't care how they're dressed or what they look like. If they're the police of that nation, of that country, of that city, of that municipality, or they're the military or something, they're the ones who are coming in with a job to protect people and to save people. If it's UN caregivers, if it's doctors, if I'm put in a hospital there, I'm not going to, like you said, I'm not going to refuse the service. And it comes down to this privilege that we have of what's good for me isn't good for someone else. And it's like, how about live and let live?
Yeah.
And I understand the conversation about like Law 21 there and the face cut. I understand the fundamental discussion about separating religion and state. I get that because I've read enough books on politics now and things that talk about the separation of religion and state. And we all know how religion has been at the base of a lot of wars and a lot of strife throughout the world. Like there's nothing, that's not saying that religion is necessarily negative, but certain factions will take things much further and use it as a means to control people or to
any singular uncontested power will always lead people down the wrong path because they stop thinking for themselves and they start thinking in line with what they're being told to do as opposed to figuring things out for themselves.
Well, that's it. So now if you're a government body, and again, I'm not taking a position for or against, because I shouldn't anyways. I should be part of the discussion. In my role, I don't get the privilege to choose a side necessarily. I want to have the conversation, but also as somebody who's involved in that conversation, and luckily it's at a federal level, at a provincial level and not a municipal level.
Right.
If you see the type of hatred that conversation incites, or the dangers that it causes, where people start threatening people because of the way they look or how they're dressed, or people start making threats to people in public or on public transit, or people are firebombing or vandalizing a mosque or something.
Right.
As a leader, if your people aren't prepared to have that conversation, then you need to stop that conversation until people are ready, or you have to find a way to have that conversation in a peaceful and respectful manner where fringe groups or extreme groups will not take it and turn it into something else. Like, we can talk about election fraud. You can have a conversation about election fraud because there is a fear of election fraud. We see it with Russia. We've seen it with other countries where we have reason to believe, and we see dictatorships, obviously, in countries around the world where there is election fraud. People just choose to be in power or elected into power. People who speak out against are either poisoned or murdered or killed, or their families are kidnapped. So this exists. This kind of threat to democracy globally exists. It does exist.
Of course.
But as a leader, do you tell a faction or a group of people to rise up? And this is like, you have to have that conversation with factual information. With it has to be intelligent. It has to be smart. And you can't encourage people to do things. I'll use an example. In my first mandate, I led the fight against the animal bylaw against pit bull type dogs.
Which listen, personally for me, I want to thank you and Valerie for that, because there were days, like I remember for that transition period where he came in and they established all those laws. There were times where we were literally afraid to take our dog out in the backyard, our dogs outside in the backyard, let them poop and pull them right back in again.
Yeah, and I went through the same thing. Yeah, with mine.
I've been an avid dog lover since I was little. I literally took my dog in because he was a pit bull mix.
Yeah.
He was a stray for like close to a year. He had no training, no nothing, and the girl literally told me at the SPCA that he's probably will get put down because he's just crazy. He's a loving, caring, beautiful dog, but he's nuts.
He's too much to manage. Yeah.
Well, that's it. But I was like, it's fine. I'll take him. It's cool. I'll deal with him. We'll figure it out. That's fine. I'll deal with him. It's fine. But when they came in and made all these stipulations, because unfortunately that poor woman died.
Yeah.
And that poor, you know what I mean? And that kid didn't know how to handle the animal he had.
Yeah. And the city didn't do what they had to do in 2 incidences prior with the same person, the same animal.
And that's it. And
there was a lot of mismanagement of that issue.
Yeah, and when all that happened, I mean, when you guys came in, like it was the first time I think I actually must have posted about politics and please vote this dude out, or like just please not even vote him out, but just please get this dude to change his mind on this thing, because you're affecting so many people and so many like animals that don't have a voice to speak for themselves.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like it was so that was like that first thing when you guys came in and she like right away were like, this is the first thing we're going to change. Like,
well, we promised it. And it's something that was important to me because I fought that case and I mean, you know, a large part of that helped us win the elections. And I don't think anyone could ever think otherwise, because a lot of people voted on one issue, which was that animal welfare. And that's fine. People don't have to know all the issues. But my point to that is that as much as I opposed that bylaw and I thought it was totally out to lunch and I thought that it wasn't well researched, it wasn't well thought out, a whole bunch of things. I had a very strong opinion and I ran with that opinion, obviously, publicly, knowing that I would be attacked. At no point, and I mean on social media, as we know, like social media is for me is like the biggest problem in the world right now in terms of like keyboard cowboys, keyboard
warriors and keyboard warriors, antagonizers,
because there's no consequence to what you say. I think it's really unfortunate. You know, I won't even get into bullying and what happens to youth, but I'm talking about adults. So adults would say some pretty stupid shit, and I mean people who supported me would say some pretty stupid shit, where they would say things about the mayor at the time, and they would like make body image remarks, or they would just say some very inappropriate things. And then there was also like violent threats. There were things that they were making. My job as a leader, or as a leader in my community, as an elected person, was not to say, hey, that's to my advantage, because the more you hate this guy, the more you're going to vote him out, the more you'll vote us in, blah, blah, blah. At no point do you play on that. My whole message was all the time, this guy believes what he's doing is right. Yep. He owns that. That's his belief for whatever reason, and he's willing to go ahead with this. That's his thing. I think it's wrong. But at no point does the size of his waist have anything to do with that. Does the language he speaks have anything to do with that? He is still the father of a child. He is still someone's spouse. He is still someone's child. At no point does he deserve bodily harm. Does he deserve, like, grow up? Like you can be against somebody without wanting to kill them, and without threatening them, or without making stupid remarks. But that's our role as leaders, is to call for a certain type of calm and a positive mobilization. And a really good example, Black Lives Matters, is a great example. The majority of the protests and the marches were totally positive. You will always have, in anything like the student marches that we were talking about, like anything, you will always have factions of individuals who will infiltrate those things with ulterior motives and use the momentum or the movement to hide and to do cowardly things, and to because again they're just not willing to do it themselves. They have to hide in the masses, and they'll use people as shields to do stupid shit. It's up to the protesters, it's up to the organizers, it's up to us as people to weed out those individuals when they're doing it, and police it ourselves to a certain degree without putting ourselves in harm's way or causing things. But we have a responsibility to do that first and foremost. But the last thing you do is, as an organizer, something like that, is call for any kind of dangerous actions.
Like militarization and like mobilization.
Like I mean, the problem with the internet is there's so much bullshit that goes on, and there's so much misinformation, and half of it's like not even true. And a story can, in politics we say perception is more important than the truth, because if somebody perceives you did something, it doesn't matter if you did or you didn't do it. You did it. You did it. That's all. That's the way it is. That's the reality of the world we live in today, the Me Too movement and all that. And that's okay. That's fine. But understand the consequences of an accusation or those kinds of things. And
the whole thing with cancel culture, it's ridiculous. It's like people so easily will write somebody off and destroy their life and make them, and just try to make them disappear. And it's like, but
bullying. It's bullying.
What are you doing? Like, you can't, like, you're talking about you want to unite people and bring things. You're creating your opposition by dismissing people. That was the whole ideal. That's been the whole thing about trying to remove like a matriarchy, or like, or like a patriarchy or whatever, was the fact that dismissing people is like one of the most like rude and obscure things you could ever do. You could hate somebody, but even in hating somebody, you're adhering to their existence. You're saying that this person exists as my opposite. This is someone whom like I live to oppose for. There's a certain level of respect in that. But canceling somebody is literally turning them into nobody. That's like it's amazing to me how fast and unique that movement took place, because what are you doing this is how you wanted to be treated? So you do something, you say one thing wrong on the internet, or you do something stupid, or you whatever. You don't want the opportunity to fix yourself. You don't want people to have the ability to change themselves over. You want everyone to be known for one moment in their life to make a mistake. I'm like, name me one like successful, proud person who is the exact same person they were when they were 5 years old to what they do now. Like, it does not exist.
Well, look, a good example to that is, when I was 14, it's not a secret, I was bullied in elementary school. I was bullied a certain amount of time. By the time I got to high school, it got really bad. And I became a skinhead. In grade 7, grade 8, I started to get into punk rock culture, hardcore music culture. And being involved in those things led me into different styles and different ways of dressing. It started off with ska and the rude boy movement and everything, which was a shaved head, Doc Martens, and a bomber jacket. It was ska and rude boy. I mean, it didn't get any more mixed cultural than that. I played on a basketball team in an 80% black high school and everything, and I loved all my friends. I ended up hanging out with some wrong people that dressed the same way, that had a different ideology, and sooner than later, before it was that, I was sucked into something that I couldn't just easily get out of, and I had to kind of find a way to navigate my way out of it. And for a couple of years of my life, I got stuck in this shitty situation of these neo-Nazi skinhead things. I was 14 fucking years old. I was a kid. I was insecure. I was bullied. I was ignorant. I was uneducated. All I was doing was trying to protect myself and associate with whatever I thought would protect me. And then I realized that that was the most dangerous thing, because that same thing turned against me. And like,
That's it.
Was my biggest threat. Today at 47 years old, I've had people try to come back, even in politics, and say, oh, if you're not careful, that's going to, I'm like, I talk about it all the fucking time. I do gang intervention work. I've been doing it since I was 19 fucking years old. I got out of that shit when I was 17. I go, am I not the example that we want of people to change? I had started one of the biggest hip hop festivals in the world, a grassroots thing. I've been a club promoter. I've been a hip hop promoter. You name it. My community, like I've worked in the clothing community, like for years and years with the Jewish community, you name it. I was 14 fucking years old. I was a stupid kid who didn't know any better and needed a good role model or good guidance in my life. And my parents obviously couldn't give it to me because I was just going to rebel against that. No authority could do it. But I had to find my way. And luckily I did. And I'm the man I am today because of it, and the father I am today, and the ally in my communities that I am today. But if I hadn't gone through that, I might be just some ignorant person spewing stupid comments out of my mouth because I haven't seen the repercussions of these actions. But it goes back to this responsibility in society that we have individually as human beings to do things. If you follow Asian, Chinese war philosophy, the art of war, Sun Tzu, things like that, which, it seems kind of
read a bunch of Taoism books and like that, Sun Tzu's Art of War and everything. Yeah.
But if you read all that, right, it all pertains to nature and how nature cohabitates. And it's enlightening if you can grasp it. It's enlightening. But one of the things in war that's really fascinating in the philosophies are preservation of life. If you besiege a city, you don't go in to kill all the people. What you do is you try to win them over. You win over their hearts and minds. You by preserving their lives and protecting them, and even the soldiers, by not killing the opponents, the soldiers, and getting them to come over to your side. If you can occupy a town with the least death or the least bloodshed, then people won't turn against you because they're not afraid of you. They want to be with you because you're not tormenting or terrorizing them. You're not threatening them. You're not leading by fear. You're leading through good leadership. And it's normal. But human nature has lost that notion of, like you said before, it's like you can disagree with somebody, but the idea is empower them, enlighten them, hear what they're saying, challenge what they're saying if you want, give them arguments, and allow them to come around on their own if they're willing to, or if they're enlightened at some point. Let them come around. I was looking at comments online today with with what happened yesterday in the U.S. and somebody said, the woman who got shot and got killed, they're like, she was a veteran, 4 tours, this and that. And somebody that I know wrote a comment saying, good for her. And I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, as much as I disagree with what happened there, nobody needs to lose their fucking life. And I feel bad for the person who pulled the trigger because they have to live with that. Yeah. They took a life, and the person lost a life, and somebody lost a parent, and somebody lost a child. And, like at the end of the day, I don't care what kind of shit you did. Nobody deserves, that's the ultimate thing. And then other people were making comments like saying all the other idiots around were just filming. And it's true. Like if you look at the footage, everyone else is standing there is just filming with their fucking cell phones. And it's like a person just got fucking shot in the chest, is on the ground dying. And what's more important to you is this fucking filming this to have it on social media. Yeah. Than realizing the magnitude of this issue right now. Yeah. And it goes back to what I was saying before about, like, it's a time where I don't know if I want people to be in politics. I don't know if I want to be in politics. I don't know if I want to be the target of people's frustrations if they're not willing to have a sensible conversation about the things that we disagree about. Yeah, because, and like, what is that like? What's that like now? Because, you got listen. I refuse to believe that all politicians are bad, regardless of whatever media and all this kind of shit wants to put it out as. Like for me, I believe it's all the same. The difference just is that the way the media wants to portray certain things, the way that it's human beings, all human beings have the power to be good or bad or make mistakes or not.
That's it. And there will be people who get into situations for the wrong reasons. That's just what it is. Some people, there are power hungry people who go into politics because they simply just want the ability to say, hey, I'm the boss. You can't tell me what to do.
And most of the time, those people are insecure, have been bullied, have been put down in their life. And at the moment that they get any kind of power, that's when they abuse of it, because that's how they were treated.
Exactly.
So when you understand the psychology of it, then you can start to help those people be better leaders, be better people through understanding, through I'm going to say tolerance, but not accepting people's actions, but tolerating human nature and understanding. Like there's ways of doing things. Like the National Guard yesterday. Like there's a whole bunch of shit that's going on with that. But people have to remember, I've seen a lot of comments online. It's like during the Black Lives Matter protest, it's true. Like the fucking National Guard was out and they were there.
They were there. They were protecting the building like crazy.
But who gave them that order? Because don't forget, they have to take orders.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be called in.
They don't do it themselves.
No,
they get ordered to do it.
And they get ordered to do it, and then it waters down to individual actions in those situations. So then it goes down to human nature and one individual maybe afraid or whatever the deal is, not excusing any actions.
Mm-hmm.
But yesterday, they were not called in by the power. And the power is the president.
Well, that's it.
And the vice president had to finally make an executive decision and call them in. But there was no way the president was going to call them in for this because he wanted this to happen.
Yeah, he wants everything to tear down. Like, he didn't win, so he wants to be the kid who grabs his basketball and says, "Fuck you guys, I'm going home. I'm going to blow up the court." Like that's what he wants.
But was it the National Guard's fault that happened? So
no,
but that doesn't mean that some of them don't share his opinions. It doesn't mean some of them don't, because again, humans have the right to have their own opinions. But when they're in that function or that responsibility, they're not acting. They should not be acting as an individual. They should be acting under the responsibility that they have. So, like when you see the police officers standing down and allowing people to come in or something, that's questionable behavior. Now, some. If you stand away from it, you could say some people are saying, well, if the more you fight something, the more you could incite a riot and it could become more dangerous.
Yes.
So sometimes it's sort of like being a doorman at a club where I have in the past. If I got a guy at the door with a gun, he wants to get in and I fight with him and I put him in a position where he pulls the gun and shoots me, and then all shit goes to hell. If I can talk the situation down and prevent anything from escalating, then that's my responsibility, and I'm just a friggin' doorman. So how do you do that, in a situation like that? So, but there was definitely questionable behavior. But that's the problem with the internet. It's so opinionated. So, you asked me, how do I deal with it? Well, one of the ways that I've at least I try to deal with it, and I've always done this, is if you go onto my social media, I try not to politicize my social media. It's about my son. It's about my family. It's about me. It's about my interests, about the things I do. It's not even about necessarily my political positions, unless it's something I'm super, super vocal about, like the animal rights thing or something like that. Right. Then I will post opinions about things. But as somebody who has 5,000 friends on my Facebook or 5,000 acquaintances or followers, whatever you would call them, I realize that out of 5,000 people, not everyone's going to share the same fucking opinion.
Of course.
So if I post something, I could be inciting a debate or an irresponsible conversation that's going to degrade or degenerate on my page that I'm going to have to manage. So my way of not having that happen is not using my social media to have that dialogue. If people want to have that dialogue, they can have a coffee with me and have that dialogue with me directly.
Yeah, exactly. Which is one of the reasons I started doing this, was because I got so tired of everybody doing that 2 cents where they just put post comment, 2 sentences. And they're having these like jaded, like broken arguments all over the place, not really saying anything to anybody, but just simply trying to jock for position and see how many other people will share their ideals. And it's like, but guys, this doesn't, like, I studied psychology and sociology in school. So it's like, whenever I look at these kind of situations, I'm like, guys, the whole point of an argument is to get an idea across.
Yep.
Like an argument usually breaks because someone isn't willing to listen to the ideas of somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
If you're literally just trying to yell over everybody because you just want to hear your idea and nobody else's, well, then you're not really looking for an argument or a debate.
Or
like turn off the comments on your fucking page, post the thing and leave it, because you're not looking for any kind of interaction. You're just looking for someone to talk and listen to you talk because you're tired of listening to everybody else.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny because on my social media I've had to do that. Like in the past with the thing I was talking about with Kader and the animal thing, the dog thing, when people were making like these like completely just inappropriate comments on my Facebook page about him, I would I had to figure out, like, how do I approach this situation without insulting the person who posted it, because that now spins into a whole other debate or a whole other problem. So how do I address the situation and make the person take ownership and remove it willingly on their own without shaming them in front of everyone, but just making them aware that maybe that wasn't appropriate or not the right place. So what I started telling people, and I started explaining to them, I go, you realize that the majority of the people who follow me on Facebook are young people, the youth that I mentor.
Yeah.
So when a kid who is being bullied because they're overweight, and I mentor them and I try to empower those kids and make sure they're safe, when they see you make a comment about a man who's overweight on here and call him all these names, how do you think that kid feels, that 16 or 14-year-old kid feels that's following it? I go, you realize you just hurt that kid. You didn't hurt him. You hurt that kid.
He's not caring about what's there. Like,
no, exactly. But that kid sees that, and that kid sees a responsible adult or a person, if they go onto their profile and figure out where they work and what their job is or what their title, their education is. Kids are smart. They go see who that person is, and they're like, wow, if that person thinks that, then it must be true what other kids are telling me in school. Yeah. Maybe I am just this piece of shit, and it's like, and that's when kids commit suicide. That's when kids hurt themselves. That's when bad things happen because adults didn't do the responsible thing or didn't know how to control their mouths or their fingers when it comes to social media.
Yeah.
And it's just bad examples of leadership, again, because you don't have to be elected to be a good leader. You can be an adult, or you can be there are great youth leaders in our world and in our communities and in Montreal that do amazing things all the time and that are 10 times more responsible than people with 50 years of life experience and all the degrees you want coming out their asses and all of the political experience in the world. And these kids that are 12 and 13 years old conduct themselves more professionally and more respectfully than some of those adults that I know.
Right.
And that freaks me out, but at the same time inspires me and scares me, because it's a whole that's nuts. Because as parents ourselves, we turn around and say, what kind of world are our kids going to inherit? If I at 14 was bullied enough to become something that I wasn't and be stuck in that, and luckily I got out, what if that happens to my son? What if he ends up going down that road and he can't get out? What if he is not like I am? What if he doesn't have the confidence to get out of it? What if he doesn't stand up? What if he falls victim to that and it destroys his life? How do I? But we have to think. We have to stop worrying about us and just us and think about the next generation. When I think about,
it's the scariest thing for me being a parent, because I was the same way when I was younger. I was bullied. I was threatened a couple of times. I was made fun of because of my skin color. Like everything. I had the gamut. I had my stuff stolen multiple times in high school. Like, it wasn't until I hit a growth spurt where I started getting bigger than everybody else that all of a sudden all that kind of stuff stopped, right? But the one thing that I'm most fearful out of everything, I'm not worried. I can teach my daughter jiu-jitsu. I can bring her to TriStar and have my boys teach her how to defend herself. I can teach her a multitude of things, math. I can teach her how to play instruments and all this kind of stuff. I can set her up. The one thing I am the most afraid of out of everything is the fact that I know what it's like to be bullied. I know what it's like to be emotionally bullied, like made fun of, all this kind of stuff, everything. And I just think about those things, but I think that I always had a way of getting away from it. Even like when I stepped out of school and I went home, I got away from it even for a little while.
Well, that's it. I don't know how old you are. But I didn't have to come home to the internet. Like, I didn't have a phone.
That's my point, right? Like, I'm seeing stories now where girls are going online and literally literally are posting shit about somebody that goes everywhere. And then you think people are pieces of shit, like when they're just talking about random stuff. They become real assholes when they start compiling on top of something sharing somebody wrote
or something. 100%.
You know what I mean? Like, and then so like that's the one thing for me that is the most scariest, because like I'm just thinking about like all the people I know who have been like kind of like mentally fucked with over lesser. Like it's and I'm also myself, because if I find out someone's doing this to my daughter, I'm gonna end up in prison.
Well, that's and look, and what's funny about this, well, not funny, but what's ironic about this is it all comes back to people fighting for their freedom and freedom of speech and their freedom of their rights. But the thing is, rights come with responsibility. Fuck. It's like your right to open your mouth and to say what you want comes with the responsibility of the repercussions. There are countries where if you say what you think, like we do, your family will be kidnapped.
Yeah,
you will disappear.
Yeah,
they don't have those rights. They don't have the rights or the privileges that we have. So when we talk about all these privileges, like I shouldn't have to wear a mask. It's like there's places where if you don't wear a mask, if you don't comply, I'm sure you disappear, or you end up in a shitty situation.
Yeah,
you know, like I mean, so it's like. We have to start thinking about what those rights mean and what those privileges. You know, you said something before when talking about businesses, and you know, I've got so many friends who own bars and restaurants. I was a club promoter, obviously. A lot of my friends went on to the restaurant business and entertainment and everything, and you name it, shows, bands, music, all of this stuff. And I mean, it's horrible right now. It's horrible. People are like, we can't do anything. And part of me, it's funny because I have to find a way to not compute all of this, but I have to find a way to process all of this information and still be able to sleep at night and say like how, you know, like I know this is impacting people. And, you know, my father was a Second World War veteran. My grandmother saw 2 world wars. And growing up, I learned about the bombing raids over London during the First World War of you know, the Nazis. And that lasted 4 years. My father fought in the Second World War to liberate Europe when he was 19 years old, and he went overseas. And I have pictures and I have documents and I have stuff. I know what that was, you know, 6-7 years of hell and sacrifices of millions of people who lost their lives. There were towns and cities that were blown to shit. There was no reopening a business. There was no I'm going out at night and turning on my lights. Fuck you. I don't care. I'm doing whatever I want. It's like if you turn on your lights, you're going to get me and everyone else on this city block killed because you decided you wanted to have a fucking cigarette and there's an airplane flying over and this is their target and they're going to drop bombs here. Like like our generation, I don't know what the problem is with our generation, but our generation, and I hold myself accountable because I'm part of it, is we've never had to fight or struggle or come together for fucking anything. And we've never had anything that's affected us on a global scale where across an ocean, people are affected the same way I'm affected here. And war did that to those generations, to our grandparents, our parents, or immigrants, our families who were immigrants who came over here with $5 in their pocket and a suitcase, didn't even know anyone and got on a boat, came over here and built a life, built houses, bought houses, got careers, jobs, raised families of 13 fucking kids, and survived and gave us the privileges and the great things that we have today. And we're sitting here crying about, and again, I'm not trying to diminish this, and I don't want to sound like I am, but it's been 10 months. Imagine if this is 4 years.
Yeah.
You know, we're lucky millions of people aren't dying. I mean, we're lucky people aren't dropping bombs on our heads right now. We're lucky we're not being told that, you know what, your 3-year-old son that I have at home, it's like, kiss him goodbye because you're going overseas to go fight and you're not coming back possibly. So this is the last time you're going to see this kid. This kid's going to grow up without a father or a mother, or, you know, like we're not in that situation. We're really lucky that we're living this problem globally under the conditions that we're living it, because we still have running water, we still have our toilets, we still have our cars, we can still, some of us can still go to work. Like, for the most part, society is still functional. The problem that we have is this fucking social media. Social media is one of the worst, and I've always said it's one of the greatest weapons of mass communication and mass destruction that exist, and it is. It's part of war strategy. If you can create dissension amongst the ranks, and if you can break the lines of communication and create confusion, then you will win the war. And that's where we're at today. It's misinformation, confusion, dissension amongst groups of people, separations, whether it's on socioeconomic levels, religious levels, color of our skin levels, you name it. Whatever happened to 50 years of fighting or 100 years of fighting for unity, and all of a sudden it can go to shit in fucking 2 or 4 years because of one person's mouth or 10 people's mouths around the world? That's a problem.
Well, I think
and
that's
it's not
what
like
America,
those other people didn't exist. It's not like those other factions don't exist.
Yeah.
The thing is, all these other factions have always existed. The difference is they didn't have a soapbox. They didn't have a platform. Nobody would ever dare allow somebody to think that it would be okay to say that publicly, which is what kept it at bay. It kept it under control. Now the problem is you have leaders who are these poor examples. And you know, and I mean, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes in my life and in politics, and I'll continue to, and I'll continue to learn from them and try to always correct things and do my best. But, you know, there's some people now, like I said before, you know, like I'm not really into politics right now and into my own responsibilities because it's a heavy burden. But I've questioned some of my friends where I've said, you know, I appreciate your comments and your criticisms, and I'll always hear them and I'll always respect your opinions. But what would you have done? What would you do? All of a sudden, I take off this hat and I give you this responsibility. What decision are you going to make? What information are you going to look to? How are you going to convince 102 other people to do that? Because it's a democracy. It's not my decision. I can say whatever the hell I want. But again, it goes back to that debate. It goes back to psychology. It goes back to philosophy. It goes back to there has to be a conversation and debate, and I have to win over people, and I have to win over a majority to do that. What are you doing to win over that majority by complaining and spread? Like, where is that positive contribution to that dialogue or that conversation? And that's what's scary, right? Like, what do we do? Like, it's like, even myself as a privileged white person, I don't have the right to speak for the Black community. As much as I've spent my life in the Black community, I've worked in the Black community. I'm not going to stand up and speak for the Black community. I'm not Black. Like, I have other issues that I've gone through. I've been judged my life because I'm tattooed, but that was a choice. You know, like, I mean, I've made choices to be a certain way. But that's what it is. As an Anglophone, I'm judged because I'm a minority and something like that. But it still doesn't compare fucking anyway to what other people are going through. But I can be an ally. I can listen and support.
It's one of those.
That's the most important thing, is listening and support.
Yeah, it's one of those things where because like my mom's white, my dad's Black, so I'm always been kind of in the middle of, like, you know, this whole thing where it's like I've kind of been able to understand both sides and been able to, you know, be like, as a Marvel reference, I've been a day walker, where it's like I've been able to shift back and forth between both worlds. But but the one thing that I always try, because I don't think a lot of people do understand it, and I try to have podcasts. Like, I had a whole podcast of a whole bunch of Black friends talking about it. And I wanted to have a podcast where I wanted to have a bunch of white people talk about the same thing, because I wanted to have the perspective of what it is to be white in 2020. Because we are hearing a lot about, you know, like Black problems and Black things. And I think that voice is getting heard. But for me, the situation always is that, and what I always try to navigate whenever I'm involved in a conversation is that, listen, you have to keep understanding where it is and what it is you want. Because what has happened is exactly what I fear was going to happen, is the movement started off on the right foot. We started walking in the right direction. But what ended up happening was a lot of people, so that they didn't get trampled over in the march, ended up joining and ended up pointing the finger at all these other people because they didn't want to be the ones who got the finger pointed at them. Yeah. And that started to stray off and pull these things into different avenues, and then started having people, pointing at other people in the street saying, you need to apologize to this guy for what your ancestors. Well, no, that's not what we're talking about. And that's not what we're asking for. What we're saying is you need to understand that although your life is a certain way and that you don't understand what it is we're going through, that this exists. That there's a differentiation between when I walk into a place and when somebody else walks into a place. Yep. Like, I don't see it any differently, and I understand it. And the one thing my father, who's black, always told me was, listen, Blake, you have to understand something. When you walk into a room, people are going to look at you differently. Yep. It's just going to happen. And it's not necessarily that people are bad. It's not that they're racist. It's not that they're bigots. It's not that they don't like you. It's some people are just around certain people for their entire lives and don't have much access to different people. So when they see you, they're not going to know what to expect from you. Yep. And that's originally going to incite fear for a small part. So in turn, it's a little bit of your responsibility to be a representation, a positive representation, so that when people do see people like you, that they understand that, oh, well, okay, cool. Like, we're good. My dad always told me, my dad used to work, my dad was worked in the military on the shipping docks. And he used to tell me that, like, my dad was born in Texas. So he used to tell me stories of like how it was normal for a white guy to call you a nigger. And he's like, but the context of how he was doing it was what was important. Yeah. He's like, we never liked the word and we didn't like it. But at some point in time, you got to know when to pick and choose your battles, because you didn't want to get hung up in a tree. But he's like, I used to have a group of guys who I used to work on the dock with, who we used to, have a beer and stuff. And they used to be like, Al, you're a funny nigger, man. Like, you're one of the best guys, whatever. And he's like, if that were to happen today, that would be it. It would be over, be end. But he's like, now we have a situation where it's like, we've lost that. And not that that should ever happen, but like, he's like, we've lost the ability of context. Yep. We've lost the ability to sit down and have conversations with people and talk to people about situations that are happening now, and really kind of delve into the real meaning behind what people are saying, as opposed to just quickly taking these little sound bites and bits off the internet.
Well, it's intention. It's intention.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And you're 100% right. And it's like, well, look, hip hop, I've always struggled with it, because it's funny, right? Like, coming from being a skinhead at 14, but prior to that, I was into hip hop, got into punk rock, then ended up in that skinhead shit. But what's funny is, at a certain point, you got a bunch of adults throwing around these words and things like that. Even myself at 14, I don't feel comfortable with it, because I'm going to school with my black friends and I'm playing on a basketball team. Even though I'm a skinhead, I mean, I'm still friends with these. Like, why wouldn't I be friends with this guy that I've been friends with since elementary school? It's not because of the color of his, like, he likes me, I like him. We get along. I dress differently. He dresses differently. We're still friends. He's not a threat. He's not going to hurt me. I'm not going to hurt him. Like he's not the person who's bullying me at school. Like, he's not the problem. So why would people throw around these kinds of words and statements? So, immediately you realize that you're stuck in something for the wrong reason. But what's crazy is then I get back into hip hop culture in the 90s and all that, and graffiti and hip hop culture. And like, everywhere I'm going, like, all my friends, again, all my black, everyone, the word is just constantly being thrown around in music everywhere. I won't even get into how women are being treated and all that. It is what it is. What has always freaked me out is it's like, they're just, I don't even want to like make any statements on the term, because it's just, for me, the word is just so uncomfortable. Like, I can't.
Yeah, you know what? I'll give you my rendition, so you don't have to say anything, okay? But like,
I can't. It's so uncomfortable for me.
Exactly.
But I want to have it, but I'm so uncomfortable to have the conversation about it, because I'm an ally.
And this is one thing, and this is what I want to do, though. Yeah.
Around that.
That's it. But the one thing for me is there was a famous a couple of years ago, what's his name? Kendrick Lamar had a concert, and they had a girl come up, and they put a mic to, like, she came down or whatever. She was on someone's shoulders, and he went down and he was singing a song, and then he put it to her mouth, and she was singing the song, and she said the word nigger because it was in the song.
Yeah.
And then everyone turned around and went, "Oh, what? What do you do?" And I'm like, but it's in the song, no. It's like I understand what you guys are pissed off about, but you guys put a mic to her face. She's enjoying herself. She just wants to be part of the tribe, and it's in the song. Like, you're creating a double standard for somebody when you don't want a double standard.
Yeah, she could also be the mother of a mixed race child.
That's it. It's like, but that's the problem. It's like this is the situation we're getting into. You guys are like the sincerity and the severity of like how strong you guys are getting around things. You're losing grasp of where the true change needs to happen. A girl, a harmless teenager who is enjoying herself at a Kendrick Lamar concert, giving you money and doing all this kind of stuff, is not meaning any malice by saying the N-word because it's built into a song that she loves, that she sings all the time. You know what I mean? Like, if you make music for that, well, then you should have stopped her from coming in the concert in the first place.
Well, listen,
you should have been the one to say, like, we're pushing that away.
I love Wu-Tang.
I mean, like, okay, try singing a Wu-Tang song without saying that.
I can't.
It's not possible.
There's like no ODB reference I can use or anything. Like, the thing is, I won't say it. But even listening to the music now, today, which in the past it didn't bother me, because as long as my peers accepted it, like I said, my black peers accepted the song, and if they told me this song is okay in the context in which the word is being used is okay, doesn't mean I need to repeat it or I need to sing it, but I can listen to the song and enjoy it with them. But now I'm even at a point where I won't even allow that to play, and I won't even play some of that music, because I'm like, even if I'm alone in private, I'm like, I feel wrong hearing that word, even though the word, the intention, the use, the artist using it, the moment and the way it's being used has nothing to do with me right now. It was recorded 20 years ago. It's the same thing with like old blues music, like, like bluegrass blues or something. When you hear like really famous blues musicians singing about stuff and they're constantly using these references, I mean, it's awkward to listen to blues music, which is the base of all rock and roll, which is the base of the Beatles, and you name it. It's awkward to listen to that historical thing. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I understand, because it's the same thing. It's like, what my ancestors did is not my fault. That's on them.
No, it's not.
And they take that to their grave, and they have to do it. My responsibility is to make sure that doesn't ever happen again. And my responsibility is not to come up with excuses for them.
Like, can we stop worrying about what people did in the past, and can we just start facilitating the change for the future? Can we start making everybody equal now, so that, even to some cases, I'll even be honest, at least in my mind, like, the removal of like these Confederate, like, people getting really mad about the Confederacy things and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, listen to me, like, it was part of our history. It's made us who we are. It's created the culture of which we stand upon to be proud of who we are and what we've overcome. You know what I mean? Like, when I look at the Jewish community, they don't disassociate themselves from Auschwitz. They don't disassociate themselves from being removed, or all the parents and family members that they lost. They don't celebrate it. They mourn it. And at the same time, I'm like, we should mourn that as well, because this is where we came from and this is where we stand.
Well, and the minute that there's no reminders or we forget about it, that's when history repeats itself. Because we forget it even happened.
That's it. 100%. But like, you have all these people wearing these neo-Nazi shirts and being, oh, well, that shit happened all the time, whatever. That doesn't stop. They're not like, well, we should knock down Auschwitz. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I went to Germany and Berlin, and they have the signs everywhere of when they decimated Berlin. Like, decimated. They have, like, you see a corner where you are, and they've got a huge poster of this is what it looked like during the World War. And you're like, okay, like, this was done. Like, this was everything was decimated. They were ruined. And you go to Germany now, and they like, if you would have went to Germany in the 40s and looked at Germany now, no one would believe that was the same place. It is the most multicultural, like happy place where like no one gives a shit about the color of your skin or the language you speak or whatever. Everybody's just so off doing their own thing and enjoying their own life. But this is what we should going towards. Don't forget the past. Don't try to like erase it, but use it as a catalyst to push yourselves forward so that we can move together and be like, yeah, we fucked up in the past. Our ancestors didn't do it right, but we can.
Well, look,
and we don't need to be enemies.
Well, look, there's interesting examples because, like, I mean, I'm on the fence about the whole issue. Like I said, I'm all for, institutions of education like museums and galleries and museums housing these places. I don't think they should be destroyed. I think they need to. I think there needs to be a place for context and conversation.
Sure, yeah. Okay.
And I think, and one thing that I think is really important is I think that the history that's been written, in a lot of cases, needs to be rewritten, fact-checked, and corrected because there's a lot of history that's omitted. Like I'm really proud of some of the stuff that happened on McGill and some of the stuff that's being asked for at the university, where people are saying that okay, McGill owned slaves, and that's true, and it's important to know that. But for me, what's important as a white person and a person who wants to be an ally and who is against racism and all that, I want to know the names of those slaves. I want to know those people's names. I want to know who their families were. I want to know they didn't die in ambiguity. You know what I mean? Or they weren't abused. I want to know who they were. I want to pay them respect. I want to give. I don't want to just be talking about McGill. Like he gets enough gratitude with the university being there, but the people who got him to where he was, who were they? What are their names? Who are their ancestors? Where are they today? Like, I mean, that's important for me to know, like, who they are, because it's not because they were victims, but they played a role in building our country, our cities, and all that as individuals, as people, and they never got the respect or the gratitude or the recognition they deserve because of the class and how they were treated. Right. Well, today I can correct that by honoring their memory in a different way, just like the millions of people who died at Auschwitz. My father fought, went over there to liberate, could have lost his life. My uncle was a prisoner of war in a German camp. I mean, I meet to this day, I still meet. There are more in Second World War soldiers. Almost all of our Second World War soldiers are dead. Almost everyone who fought in that war has died. There are very few soldiers left that are veterans just because of their age, because they're all 100 or more now. So, but there are thousands upon thousands of survivors from the concentration camps who were babies when they were in those concentration camps and tattooed. I know my friends in the Jewish community and the people that I'm involved with. I've been to synagogues where there are victims of the Holocaust who are only in their 70s, who are 75, because they were 2 years old when they were a prisoner in a camp and they lost their parents. So, but the thing is, those people deserve to be remembered, and their stories need to be heard, and they need to know that what they went through served. I don't want to say, I don't know if that's the right way to say it. Not served a purpose, but wasn't without purpose. It's that every
life has meaning. Yeah,
that's exactly it. And their lives and their experience and their families' lives and the lost lives all have meaning and need to be remembered and honored. It's
sorry,
who let the dogs out? But but that's what it is. It's like, but it's sad because, like, even if I watch a World War II documentary, I feel awkward watching the documentary because as soon as I see something on Hitler, I feel like wrong. I feel.
Hold on 1 second, Sterling.
Yeah, do it.
Next, go.
Radiant, go down. Radiant.
All right. Sorry about that. House is going nuts.
I know how it is. But it's like we're saying, it's sad that that we're so guarded now for the wrong reasons, but we still need to be diligent. Like, I mean, I can still not have a conversation about something freely. And as a leader in my community, as somebody who's so close to the Black community and has been, I wish I could play a more active role but without overstepping or
Not trying to take it over and making it more about like
about me but then also the fear of somebody of me becoming a target because I'm so vocal and supportive, and then being attacked by, because again, it goes back to human nature. There'll always be one person or people who will attack. My experience has been very positive, and I'm very blessed for that in the community and being accepted and supported. There's very few people that I know that can talk openly about their past in youth gangs and things like I've been involved in within the communities that I'm involved in, and not be judged or criticized. And that's a true privilege for me, and that's a true honor for me to be able to do it. But that reminds me of my responsibility to always be honest about that with people, and to not hide away from it. Hey, cutie. But
say hi. Say hi, Sterling.
Hey. Hey, but that's it, and we have to do it for them, for her, for my son. Like, I mean, that's our responsibility as citizens, as global citizens, as leaders, as community leaders, as artists, as activists, as parents, is to make sure that they have something safe, and they'll face their own problems, and they'll face their own. The world will be what it will be for them. Yeah. And all we can do is make sure that they have the best guidance or the best foundations to face those things in their life, so that they have that moral compass that will help guide them through those situations, because they will face those problems. But I mean, there's so much more we can be doing in the world. And when we see the things that are going on, and like I said, you know, I've thought about it a lot, where I'm like, you know what, do I really want to stay involved in politics?
Well, I hope you do, Sterling, because I think you're one of the very few who have a realistic mindset and who are in politics and inciting change for the right reasons. Well, I'm not going to say, you know, I'm not going to say that all politicians are like, you know, power hungry and whatever. And I'm sorry that, you know, the media portrays it, because I know there's probably a lot of decisions that don't get put into the light of day. And there's a lot of things that you guys have to deal with that we in the general populace probably don't see. But being able to talk to people, you know, like you, who really kind of have their head on straight and who are doing this, not because they're trying to be, you know, eventually the mayor or, you know, the provincial, you know, running the province, which I hope one day you do run the province, but, you know, or prime minister or something like that. But, you know, but you're in this to really create change and help actually make things better.
Well, what we have to do is we have to be in positions of conversation. Like, I mean, you know, I've toyed with the idea of Senate, of federal Senate, because in Senate it's commission work. You're reviewing and criticizing and commenting and bettering laws and things. You're working. It's group work. It's nonpartisan group work, where you're trying to make these decisions better than they are, better than the way that people are, and that's our responsibility, is to just do the best. And anyone can come along and change it. Like, for example, the animal bylaw. Again, you know, let's say, for example, Valerie's not reelected. That's possible. It can happen. Right. So whatever is going to happen is going to happen. I might not get reelected, but then the next person who gets elected or comes along, or the next group, can easily bring that back in and reinvoke that.
Yeah,
that's how easy it is.
That's the thing. Freedom, like. There's a famous saying that, you know, freedom is not freedom is an ever-changing situation. It's something that you can never stop fighting for, because the second that you know, let your guard down or do something where you just think something's a given, somebody's going to take it away from you because they can. Well, and if you
I was watching something the other day on Rwanda and on what happened there with the genocide, and it's all politics, eh? It all starts with politics. Same thing. World War I, World War II. The Nazi Party. It's a political party. That's how. It was politics.
Germany was in a really bad place financially. They had no money, whatever, and he came in on the ideal that you know, it's everybody else who's keeping us down, and we need to keep Germany pure, and that's how we're going to raise ourselves out of, you know, squalor. And so that idea too, because people were desperate.
Imagine coming out of a pandemic with billions and trillions of dollars of debt, and future generations having to pay for that, and businesses closed down, and people
Yep.
who have lost everything,
Yep.
and governments who want to reinvoke language issues or religious issues, or all of a sudden.
Which I don't know your stance on this, and I don't want you to get in trouble for it, but that was probably the most infuriating thing I think I've ever seen anywhere for anything. Like I can honestly, as a person, as a human being, I can understand not really knowing what to do in this situation, because this is an unprecedented situation that anybody would ever be in. But to have the audacity to spend $5 million, yeah, go play with mommy, Bubba. Okay. She's like, I'm bored. Stop. To have the gumption to spend and say, we're going to spend $5 million on assuring that the French language is being upheld in Quebec. I'm like, dude, I don't care if doctors and nurses are speaking Swahili. I'm like, just get them here. Like, just get them to help. Do whatever we got to do. But I'm like, can we just put this age-old thing away for a while until the world gets back to normal, until people are back at their jobs, until people are doing stuff? Like, they had people going into businesses were struggling, being like, well, your signs are wrong, so we're going to fine you. It's like, well, fine me. I don't have any money anyways.
That's
like,
right.
I'm just like,
I mean, it's a sensitive issue for the point of one of my roles and responsibilities is to protect intergovernmental relations. And I mean, that's a very complex statement in itself, right? Because when you have a government in place that you rely on to make investments into your city, which is the biggest city in Quebec, with the biggest population, multicultural, like you said, and we need investments in transportation and mobility, you name it, education, whatever.
Just healthcare. Can you put the $6 million in healthcare
and business? The relaunch of the economy, and you have a government that didn't win their elections here. So the reality is what it is, and that's not a criticism of the party. It's just it is what it is. At a certain point, my job is to ensure that you get the services that you need. So again, my opinion doesn't really matter.
No,
what
it doesn't.
matters is the government in place is the government I have to try to work with. I have to respect the fact that they've earned their place there. They've been elected. They have their right and their privilege to try to implement the things that they believe in the time that they're in office. I have to work and navigate that, as much as some of it may affect me or I might oppose it. But I always try to find the positive stuff. So, for example, I'm an Anglophone in theory, if you look at it, but I'm perfectly bilingual. Like I said, I have a high school education. The reason I do the job and I can do the job that I do today is because I'm perfectly bilingual. And that's because my parents, who spoke English, put me in French immersion. And I love and I'm grateful every day, without ever taking away from my English side. I'm grateful every day that I speak 2 languages, and I'm proud of my French language. I would love to reinforce and promote it. My son is speaking French. I make sure he's not going to go to French school, but he will be perfectly bilingual. I will guarantee that. Not because he has to, not because whatever, because I want him to embrace culture, and I want him to enrich his life with possibilities. And those are the positive messages to encourage people to do it. We're lucky that we live in Quebec. We are lucky that we can learn 2 languages. We're privileged. But when people feel threatened or of lesser of a society, and I understand that for a very long time historically, and this is true, and it belongs to the French population. The French were treated, because they were a minority, as lesser of a group of individuals, and they did not get the same rights, and they didn't have it. And the shoes just changed feet now. Now it's Anglophones that are in the other thing. But we need to learn from that, and we need to learn the fact that what happened to them wasn't right. What's happening to us isn't right. So let's come together based on both of those experiences and create a better society that is multilingual, bilingual, and all that. And it's great to be bilingual. It's great to be a French one, but the messaging, a lot of the times, it's always, and my biggest problem with politics all the fucking time is the messaging and the communication and the way things come out always seem like you're behind the 8 ball, and it was poorly communicated. It was the wrong phrasing. It was the wrong statement. And somebody, if you're not careful, somebody's going to get hurt. And that's where I say words are so powerful and so important. And you look to the great speakers of our time, whether it's the Martin Luther Kings or the Nelson Mandelas or all that. Like Nelson Mandela came out of 27 years of prison and apartheid and brought a country together.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't do what's happening in the U.S. He could have easily turned that country upside down. He could have been an angry, vengeful, hurt man. And instead of that, he showed us what true leadership is. Martin Luther King, even Malcolm X, Bobby Seals, I don't care. What's ironic is the majority of the leaders that I look up to are all black leaders, ironically. So it's funny as a white person, but they've been some of the best orators, some of the best speakers. The messaging and just what they say, I don't know if it's because of their proximity, maybe in touch with their religious side, or the notion of community, not necessarily religion, but what religion brings you together as a community and working as a people together as a group of individuals, not necessarily about the views of the religion, but just community supporting community and coming to the help of community. But that's what we lack in this world today is those great speakers, those great people who can inspire us and stand up and say something that's just so empowering and moving, but that unites people rather than separates. And it's just enough with all this fucking divisiveness. And when we bring in mental health issues and stuff and stress like we're dealing with now, it becomes such a toxic and dangerous environment, because what happened in the US, and I said it to my mother-in-law the other day, what happened she was like, oh, sometimes you've got to leave that and just kind of like let go and move on and live things day by day. And I'm like, but I can't. I go, because that can happen here. Yeah. People, we have marches in the street where we have 10,000 people marching because they don't want to wear a mask. Yeah. It's only a question of time before people walk into City Hall and take over City Hall or something, because they think that that's what needs to be done to get their point across. And all of a sudden now your grandson's father is in danger, or your family is in danger, because I've chosen to represent people and do this job when few people will or can and aren't willing to put themselves at that kind of risk. So it's a scary time to be involved in politics. And when you think about something like the first female mayor of the city, I mean, if there's two things that I'm going to take with me to my grave that I'm going to be extremely proud of, is going to be when I was working at the Jamaican Association of Montreal, when Barack Obama was elected, and I was standing in front of the TVs there and I watched the first black president be elected. That for me is going to be one of the things that I carry in my heart to my grave, because it for a moment, and still to this day, it proved to me that anything's possible in terms of change, that we can move past certain things. When I saw the first female mayor in 375 years get elected, and I helped get her elected, the first woman in terms of gender equality get elected to office in Montreal, I'll always be proud of that, regardless of some of the bad and good things that have happened. I'll always be proud. When I see statements online where people are, they make sexist remarks or things like that, I'm like, why would you want to be a politician and take and just like deal with that shit? Why would anyone want to do that when you could just go to a 9 to 5 and tap out when you come home and not to be engaged? And the majority of society, that's how we live, right? We're disengaged. The whole saying, keep the people stupid. And this is the old adage, which is true back in the day with how rulerships functioned, which is, if the people don't understand, or if they don't feel like they have a role or a place to play in this conversation, then they just won't be in the conversation. Then the conversation will be amongst a very small group of people who will end up making the decision. I don't believe society should be like that. I believe everyone should be involved in the conversation, and I want to mobilize and involve as many people in the conversation as possible. But I want those people to come to the table and be a part of the conversation responsibly, respectfully, and intelligently,
Yeah.
not irresponsibly and ignorantly.
Yeah.
So, and that's the scary thing. Like, it's like, this is an election year. I have to make a decision. Do I run again? Do I represent my community? Am I doing a good job representing my community? If just because I wasn't able to do all the things that I said I wanted to do, I was there at the right time, at the right place for some big issues that I was able to fight and push through. I won't win every fight. I won't win 100% of the time. I won't get 100% of the population's respect and gratitude and love and endorsement, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean that I have to represent anything less than 100% of the population, or at least try to. It doesn't mean that I can't listen to 100% of the population. It doesn't mean I can't be patient with 100% of the population. It doesn't mean I can't try to empower those people who even dislike me with the proper information and build their arguments. It doesn't mean I can't learn from those people. So, but it's honestly, it's a huge responsibility that every night when I go to sleep, I think about now. And I'm like, it's not fun, but again, it shouldn't be. This job, you don't do this because it's fun. You don't do this because it's easy. You don't do this for praise. Any of my colleagues who cry or whine about being public figures and being attacked or that, you know what? Well, then maybe you shouldn't be doing this, because we know going into this, that's going to happen. That's the reality of human nature. I have to know that. I have to focus on the positive stuff while not turning my back to the negative stuff. I can't ignore the negative, but I don't have to let that control my emotional state of mind when I'm doing things, because I can't be making decisions based on emotion. They have to be based on what I truly believe at that moment, based on the information that I have access to is the right thing. And in the future, it may come to light that that was the wrong decision. And I'm okay with taking ownership at that time for something that could have been a better or a different decision.
Yeah.
But all I can do is do my best with what I have access to. And the most important thing is making sure that I have access to as much information as possible and as much conversation and as much dialogue as possible, because that's where I'll learn.
And what is that about politics, or at least politicians? Because at least that's what it seems like to the general public, that, you can't make a mistake. Or when you do make a mistake, it's like it's this thing where it's like you can't, like, no one can just put their hand up and say, you know what? I had some bad information. I fucked up. Sorry. Like, I'll fix it. I'll do whatever I can, to make things right. I'm going to figure it out. I let you guys down in this respect, but like, I fucked up. I'm owning it. Going forward, I'm going to fix it. It just seems like in politics, and I don't know, again, I don't know if that's the media portrayal or if that's just like some kind of political playbook where it's like, you can't admit your mistakes, but in not admitting mistakes, what you do is you're separating yourself from your humility and your humanity. Yep. Like the whole thing about being human is that you will make mistakes and that you will do stupid things and you will be dumb and you will live outside of logical thinking. Like you'll push the envelope on certain things. That's what makes us these weird animals that can manipulate our surroundings. But like, it just seems like in politics, and I don't know if this is media portrayal or if this is just the actual political playbook. It's like, no one can just be like, you know what? I thought at the time, because of this, and this, that this was going to be the right idea. But now when I look back on it, it was stupid. Well, and I'm never going to make that mistake again.
I think it's a culmination of a group of things, right? Like, if you could run the city, and you can, okay, well, let's say if you knew you could run the city and you felt confident running the city, then you would run the city. Yeah. What people want is they want people to do it for, like, it's normal. I work for you. You are my employer. My citizens are my employers. I represent and work for them. That notion has to be constantly reiterated, because people tend to feel as if people aren't working for them. I'll get the occasional comment where people will be like, if you don't change parties or if you don't leave that party, you'll see you're going to lose the next election because she's going to lose and something's going to happen. And I'm like, you realize you can vote for individuals, right? Like, even if I'm a member of a party, You can
You can vote for me.
not vote for them. Like, I mean, you can,
Yeah.
if you believe in what I'm doing, you can still have me elected, but none of my peers. If that's what
Right.
you choose, that's your
Right.
power.
Yeah.
However, realize that if I'm elected into a minority government, I will not have access to information,
You
and
won't do anything.
I won't be at the table for certain things. So I'll be able to do some things, but I'll be very limited. So you have to choose where you want me. Do you want me with the majority, where my voice is heard, even if I'm not getting all the changes done, but at least I'm at the table for the conversation? Do you rather have me just as a loud voice in opposition, not doing any, like, where do you want to position me? Because I'm your employee. Where do you see me positioned? But I think that people don't want like a general person. Like, this is stupid, right? Because we all are just regular citizens. But
Yeah.
I don't think anyone and I think that's the scary idea, is that if anyone could do this job, then why are you doing it? Why am I not doing it? And
Right.
well, then you got to run. You've got to run in an election and choose to do. Put your other stuff aside and do this. This is your sacrifice. This is your service to your community. You're going to be paid for it. You're going to be paid well, but you're going to have to be on call 365 days a year, 24/7. You're going to have no privacy. Your life is going to be public. Your family is going to come under attack. You'll be under attack. You name it. It's not peaches and cream. So do you really want to do that? So people have this impression that the people who run are like these, like, it's funny because we say that they're idiots, but at the same time, we want them to be superheroes and not be wrong and always be right. But we're just human beings. And the day that I realized, it's funny because in 2013, when I was elected, I remember the first time I sat at city council, it was so intimidating. And I've never had I've never been a really huge public speaker other than in the worlds that I'm involved in, like the hip hop community or something. Like, I can be a really big, mouthpiece for things, and I'm very confident with something I know about. But I was thrown and hurled into this world and this arena that I had never been in. And I was like, whoa, I got to figure this out. I got to learn it. I got to observe. I got to watch. I got to listen. I've got to figure out who I am in this world and how I want to be heard in this world. But that takes time. You just don't come out of the gate yelling and doing it. It's like you pay attention, you observe, you learn, you look at the ground, that's being a smart general, is like knowing the lay of the land. And I remember in the first few council sessions, like, I didn't even own a suit and tie at first. I bought one. I had to go to council in a suit and tie. So I'm looking at all these people talking, and they've been elected for years, and they're saying things, and they're having these conversations on these complex multi-million-dollar contracts. And I'm like, holy shit, I don't know the terminology or the phrase. Like, there's stuff here that it's not even a part of my vocabulary. And it's very intimidating. And by about the fifth council, by about 6 months into it, and the more you listen and pay attention, you're like, there's an argument happening or a debate happening, and you're listening to both sides, and you listen to the rebuttal by the administration. You're like, are you kidding me? It's like, wait a second. I don't think I understand the issue, but what you just said does not make sense. It's not even intelligible. It's not like, it's totally emotional. It was not at all based on any like, you basically just acted like a kid in a schoolyard, and you reminded me of being 13 and being bullied.
Yeah.
It's like, you really did not. And I'm like, then I had this epiphany where I was like, everybody in this room is just a regular person.
Right.
And it's the same. And then I it was the same epiphany I had with academics, where I had to be like, okay, like, my wife just got her PhD. My wife is an extremely exceptional, intelligent, powerful woman. She's super inspiring, and I love her to death. But she's not smarter than me. But before she had her PhD, I was the deputy mayor. I wasn't better or smarter than her or more powerful.
Of course.
What happens is, we, in different areas of information, have greater strengths and a greater capacity. And if I use that as an ally rather than seeing it as a threat or a weakness or me being lesser, or together we're more powerful. So when I look on a council floor and I see the different portraits of 103, or in council we're 65 of us, I see the 65 individuals, and I see some were lawyers, some were accountants, some were community workers, some were this. What's interesting is it's the sum of all parts that makes that place strong. It's not the individual. It's that experience from each individual. And the question is, how do you get that conversation where each individual with the strength and the confidence to contribute to that conversation at that moment is actually heard and is actually used to elevate the position or the decision? And that's the problem, is some people see other people, their experience as a threat. Like in 7 years of being elected as a city councillor, I have not been involved once in a graffiti file for the city of Montreal.
Just crazy.
I am an ongoing expert worldwide on the subject. I was a practitioner, which makes me even more of an expert. I understand the ins and outs of the culture. I understand the ins and outs of the motivations of doing things. Even though it's changed and it's evolved and it's different than when I was involved, there still are a lot of similarities. I could write a thesis and become a doctor on the subject tomorrow, but yet I'm not consulted or a part of the conversation, and that expertise isn't being used. Now, that's frustrating, but at the same time, it's just a question of time and patience.
Yeah.
Now's not the time.
That's right.
If I stick around, there will be an opportunity, there will be a time, there will be a moment for me to have that conversation and be a part of that solution or that discussion or that whole dialogue.
Yeah.
Right now, the other people aren't ready to have it. So no matter what I know and how much I know, it's not going to be heard anyways, because other people aren't ready to have that conversation. And until they want to have the conversation, until they're ready, until they ask to have that conversation, there's nothing I can do to force it or convince them, or so it's not worth the energy when I could be focusing on the dialogues or the discussions that are happening right now. But it's funny because everybody has a strength or an expertise. Everyone has that, and it's not based on your academic background. It's not based on your professional. It's based on the sum of all of that.
Yeah.
You know, your life experience, everything. But it's really crazy, and that's where politics, I think, is crazy, because I see some people who are friends of mine saying that they're going to run in the next elections and they're going to do things, and you know, they're making moves for certain positions, the city, and I think it's great, and I think they should, and I think that it's going to be great. And part of me is saying, like, because they're not involved on the inside, oh boy, if you do, which I hope, wait till you're there, and then when you can't do anything or you don't, and all of a sudden all the people who helped get you there turn on you, I'm curious to see how you're going to manage that and what will come out of your mouth. Will your position stay the same, or will you just try to protect yourself or come up with excuses? Because the reality is, you should know that going into it, what the limitations are.
Right. And
if you don't understand those limitations going into it, then you have to be careful what you're saying before you go into it.
Right.
Because if you make, and this goes back to the simple thing that a lot of politicians make promises they can't keep.
Yes.
Well, the funny thing about that is it comes from a place, in my observation and opinion, of when you want to do something or you have an ideology and you want to invoke something, logically you want to be vocal about it. You want to say, this is what I truly believe. And it's true. You do truly believe this. But once you're in a position to actually implement it, all of the other factors that lie in front of you have to be taken into consideration before you can change something. There are laws, there's consequences, there's agreements, contracts, there could be union agreements,
everything.
Funding the police. Absolutely very important conversation to have. I'm more for reallocation of funds for community policing and things like that. And I truly believe that, coming from my background. But you have unions involved, you have agreements, and you realize that if you try to force something on a union, the union will strike.
Yeah.
And so if you don't understand union negotiation and you're dealing with individuals and human beings, if your goal is to do this, then you need to get the buy-in. So you need to show these people how it's going to better their position, their job. It's going to empower them. It's going to make their lives better. It's going to be better forever. But it can't just be about you. It has to be. They have to be a part of that conversation.
Yeah, like you can't just ask people to yield to your ideal. They need to feel like they're part of it somehow.
Absolutely, and then you have to know that there's legislative law, like there's laws at the provincial level that govern policing. It's not municipal. It's delegated to municipalities. The laws of policing are at a provincial level.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't. It's like when somebody says you should call in the military. It's like you realize the military is governed by the federal government. They're the Canadian Armed Forces. Yeah. And if the province wants to bring them in, the province has to negotiate and ask the federal government to mobilize the army. The province has to be willing to contribute to pay for that mobilization financially, and the federal government has to be able to allocate those funds. They all have to deem it necessary and so. But like when you get into all those legal issues and all of that, and you have lawyers now all of a sudden around you telling you what you can or can't do, it becomes very difficult because you don't have absolute unequivocal power as an elected official to do whatever you want. If not, you imagine the chaos that would ensue, like we're seeing in the U.S.
Queens and pharaohs again because they just do what they want without asking anything.
Dictatorship, exactly. So the thing is, there's mechanisms in place that do not give me the power to make a decision and just do it.
Right. Understandable.
And it has to be a majority that decides. I mean, that is democracy. Yeah. So anyways, it's a really, really delicate time to be in politics globally and anywhere, and to be in activism even, and to just be a human being. It's a really difficult time with everything that we're facing. And it just makes everything difficult. It's difficult to be an entrepreneur now. Like, I mean, people who want to be entrepreneurs, it's like, man, your dreams are, unless you just do it and just like close your eyes and make that leap of faith, man, a lot of people I know won't do it. Athletes, I mean, there's people who could go to college on scholarships that for 2 years or a year haven't been able to practice their sport and just are no good now, or they've lost it because they didn't continue to do it. And that's the end of that career, or that's the end of that person. That person could have been, should have been, would have been, but will not be. You know, like, these are the realities that we face when we walk out of the house and we're worried about wearing a mask. Think about the person that you cross on the street and what they could have been, should have been, might have been, who they are, who they might be. They might be a frontline healthcare worker. They might be a member of the Canadian Armed Forces who were deployed during COVID into our long-term care. For instance, that person might have saved your grandparents' life in a long-term care facility. Like, we just don't take the time to look at the person next to us and think about how, as a society, we better ourselves by working together and truly and honestly looking at each other and, you know, just fucking smile at someone. Just like wish somebody a good day. Whatever happened to that?
You know, like, can we just drop all the shit for, like, you know, a couple months? You know, just listen to each other and just do what we're supposed to do for a little bit. You know, just put all the weird shit aside and the, you know, the conspiracy theories of that, you know, like, oh, they're doing this because they're trying to control us and all this kind of stuff. It's like, can we just unite under the fact that we're all trying to get through this together, and that we all want a sense of normalcy, and we all want to go back to the way that, you know, like, to the way where we felt that we weren't scared to go outside, or we weren't scared to shake the hands of our neighbor, or we weren't worried that, like, you know, if we're in the wrong place, the wrong time, that we're going to end up making someone sick that could possibly kill them. Like, can we just fight that fight first and then worry about all these seeming like small ideals that, like, you know, just that in the end aren't really going to change, you know, like, very much? Like, can we just
what would be funny is, and I mean, what I'm about to say is like a total, like, it's like so impossible, but it would be so great. What I think about, you know, when we talk about a quarantine and a lockdown for 30 days, what would be amazing is during that lockdown, imagine if there was a social media blackout for 30 days. So during that 30 days, while people are going stir crazy and completely nuts, had to pick up a phone and call somebody if they wanted to talk to them, or communicate with a relative, or if they wanted to say something or make a comment, they actually had to be a part of a conversation with a group of people on the phone or whatever. Like, it would be so great to take away that, to blow up the internet, literally. I think I think like the most positive, I mean, I'm saying this and I'm saying this publicly, which is going to be really weird, but I don't know if I'm using the right terms, and I hope I'm not crucified for saying what I'm going to say, but like, probably one of the greatest acts of like positive terrorism that could ever happen is if somebody blew up the internet right now, to some degree, like, or social media, and just like blacked it out, wiped it off the map, and held it hostage and said, you know what, until the world proves that you can use this responsibly, we're pulling it off the books. Like, I saw a statement by Zuckerberg on Facebook today, it passed on my feed, where he talked about how they were deactivating Trump's social media, Instagram and Facebook, for the next 2 weeks, because they feel that it's being used to incite violence and hatred and terrorism, domestic terrorism. And
you're about 3 too late, bud.
Yeah, well, this is exactly it. I was like, really? I'm like, you realize that there's kids that are committing suicide because they're bullied on the internet, and this has been going on for the last like 20 years or 15 years, and you're not doing something. And because this man-child, because 5,000 people walked onto a hill, now you're thinking about doing it, when how much is a children's life worth? A 5-year-old kid committing suicide because they're bullied on the internet, or a 10-year-old kid. Like, I mean, that should be a reason to shut this shit down.
Yeah.
Like, there should be zero tolerance. But this freedom of speech thing, again, like I said, I'm all for freedom of speech. I'm not about taking away people's rights. But man, when is there going to be a consequence for individuals and what they say? It's like,
yeah,
I don't know what that consequence should be or how it should be invoked.
Well, you know, there is talk about removing the anonymity of people on the internet. There was some talks about that, like, where if people are, deemed to be, like you said, bullying or because in the UK, if I'm correct, I believe if they believe that you're creating what they call hate speech, so bullying, whatever, they have the right to out you, and they have the right to charge you, and they have the right to put you in prison, because they feel that what you're saying could deem somebody else in trouble, could hurt somebody else, or could lead and incite violence. They have taken that step where they put people in prison.
We have it in Canada. Canada, hate speech is zero tolerance. But the thing is, the law is not always applied. And we see it happen all the time, where somebody will say something and they're let out. They're let off. Like, we saw it with, a perfect example was the raid on the Vice offices.
Yeah.
When the Vice offices in Montreal were infiltrated by my old friends, well, not my friends, but like I was saying, the people that I would have probably, if I would have been 14 now today, would have associated with, went in and intimidated and did this, and literally it was an act of terror and intimidation and bullying and threatening and all this, and hate speech, and you name it. And the courts deemed no consequence. It's just totally, it's ridiculous. And it's like, I don't know what we're afraid of, but it's the same thing. And I say this lightly too, but it's the same thing with convicting somebody for discharging their service revolver in a situation where they shouldn't have. There should be consequences. There should be, like, I mean, I'll use the US as an example, but we have enough examples here in our own city that we don't need to focus. And I said this during the George Floyd thing. I'm like, what happened to George Floyd was a total, it was just atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the black men that died here in Montreal?
Yeah.
I mean, I named off a list of people. I was like, what about them? What about their families and them? I'm like, why wasn't this enough? Why? and it's no disrespect to George Floyd or his family. What happened was wrong. Nobody should. And God knows I've been arrested a million times, so I know what a forceful arrest is, because I'm 6'4" and 240 pounds, and like I said, tattooed from head to toe. And believe me, you want to put handcuffs on me, it's not going to be easy. Like, depending on my state of mind and why I was being arrested. But like, I mean, there are men and women, but men who have lost their lives here, men of color, suffering from mental health issues. But yet I see people running around talking about somebody somewhere else, which is great, because as a global society, every life should matter, like we said before, and we should stand up and defend every individual who loses their life in a situation. But it's like, I don't know. It's like there's stuff happening right here on our own front yards on a daily basis, and it's been happening for decades, and it doesn't get any better, and there's no consequences. There's no consequence for the action. A police officer unloads 9 rounds on a TTC bus in Toronto, and there's a consequence. It's why not here? Like this, and again, I'm not condemning the police. I wouldn't want that job. I would not want to be an officer in a situation where I panic or I'm afraid, or like, I don't want a gun. Don't give me a gun. Don't ever put a gun in my hand. As a human being, I don't ever want that kind of power or authority in my possession, because I don't ever want to be in a situation where I have to decide or I'm not capable and just react emotionally and do something, and then I have to live with it for the rest of it. Like as much as I'm accountable for everything I do, I don't ever want to, and that's my responsibility, is to never own a firearm or be around one. Knowing that's a choice I make. Same reason why I don't drink and I don't do drugs, is because I don't want an excuse for an accident to happen with my mouth or my demeanor or my actions. I need to make sure that I'm on point all the time. It's important to me. So it's a tricky situation, but it's like, it's so sad, because there needs to be consequence. And that's the thing, is like, on the internet, you can say whatever you want. There's no consequence. You can be in a position of authority and do something. There's no consequence. You can tell people you're not allowed to travel and then travel yourself. There's no fucking consequence. It's like, you can't go visit your dying grandparents in a hospital or a long-term care facility, but I'm going to get on a plane and I'm going to go visit my dying family member. And it's like, I've lost my parents. I know what it's like to lose a loved one, like to lose my parents. It's horrible. But I feel for all of those people that have lost their parents or lost a family member right now and weren't even able to be beside them when it happened. And some people are deciding that their situation is justified for them to be, but then don't be in politics. Just don't be in politics. If you can't walk the walk or talk the talk, like don't do it. That's our responsibility, is to do that and to make those sacrifices and to be that example and to do that. And it's just, some people, not everyone, again, it's human nature, but and sometimes it can be about age, it can be about experience, it's human judgment, there's errors in judgment, you name it. There's a multitude of reasons why something like that can happen, but it's just sad. And then even the criticisms are sad, because then the person, you can't really criticize them for being emotional and being weak or vulnerable and making a decision to do something because they felt that that's the decision they had to make at that moment, and that's what they chose to do, and they got on a plane and went and visited somebody. Okay, like, it's not the same thing as going to a 5-star resort and being being on the beach. That's true. And so, but I mean, it's sad, because we live in a current climate of criticism and throwing rocks and like attacking people.
It's more important to point out the faults and like somehow virtue signal than it is to actually find like a real answer or like a real solution to things. We give more praise to the person who is being a victim, who's praising themselves as being a victim, or as someone who is pointing something out but not really taking action, simply just pointing at it and saying, like, look at it, like you said, the example of the girl dying, because she was shot in the chest at the state capitol. It's like the person who films it is going to get more notoriety than the person who goes over there and tries to save her life.
Yep.
And there's something wrong there.
Yeah, and I mean that's the sad thing, and that's a testament to human nature, right? Somebody made the statement, like some of the intelligent comments that were made, as intelligent as it can be in that situation, but like some people made comments saying, and they were sad statements, but they were like, this person fought for their country and fought to defend democracy, and then this happens and they did this and they stood on the other side of it. But what people have to realize is that each of that individual who chose to join the military and serve and to do that also has the right to their own political opinions. And it doesn't mean because they serve in the military that they necessarily agree with everything that's happening in government. But while they're in service, they have a job to do, and they hopefully do that job respectfully and as intelligently as they can and whatever. But that doesn't mean because she was a veteran that she has to share the same opinions as you, or
That's right.
she can't have her own opinions. But it also doesn't mean that she should have died because of that.
No,
you know what I mean? And that's the sad thing. It's like, in my case, vote me out. You don't like what I'm doing and you don't agree with me, you have a right to either vote for or against me.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you know me.
Yeah.
It doesn't. So when you criticize me as an individual or my past or my life experience or something, good on you if you actually know me and have sat down with me or have ever had a conversation with me about it, and then you have drawn a conclusion or an opinion, then that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But until which I'm always, the people who hate me and who attack me, I am always offering publicly to sit down and meet with them and have a coffee with them and talk with them and hear their frustrations or their anger or whatever it is, as long as they can do it respectfully. And again, they can even yell at me to a certain degree as long as it stays respectful.
Yeah.
And I'll sit and listen to it because I might learn something about myself. Who knows? They may just be able to see something that I didn't see. And if they do see something and can point something out that could be a weakness or something that I didn't realize needed to be or should be or could be corrected, maybe I want to know about it because maybe I want to better myself. Maybe I want to correct that. But if I'm not willing to face that judgment, respectfully, then how can I grow from that exchange? But what I find is a lot of the times none of those people ever want to meet. And it's really sad because it's sincere. Like, I mean, again, I wouldn't be as public and as open and as I have been my whole life about my past, as in youth gangs and things like that, if I was afraid of being judged.
Of course.
And that's something that's made me a stronger person and maybe a more empathetic human being, is because I won't allow myself to hide behind something. I did what I did. I know what I did and what I didn't do. I know how bad and how bad it wasn't and whatever, or how far. The people who knew me or who still know me and who knew me then, they can attest and they can defend and they can speak to me, to who I am. And they do all the time, and they defend me and they speak about me as a person, and that's fine. It's not for me to defend myself, but I enjoy having those conversations because I can help other people through those conversations. I can help other young people get out of situations that they're in that they think are absolutely impossible for them to get out of, whether it's drug dealing or a gang or a bad relationship or something abusive, or you name it, or a job that they don't want to be in, or a dead end in a career and they have other opportunities. If I can motivate and inspire people to do things, then, and if that's the one thing I can do in politics, and that's where I leave this conversation on this note, is that the one thing that is 100% within my power at all times as an elected official, the one absolute thing, or the absolute things that are in my power, is I can make the time to talk to people and have a conversation with people and hear their grievances or their concerns. That's within my full power. It's my choice to make that time and to do it, and I do it. And to always try to find an answer or a solution or something that can better a situation. I have the power to try, to make the effort, to do something, and that's where it starts. And if I'm not willing to start there at that base, which is the 100% in my control, and nobody else has any power over me with that, whether it's a party leader, a mayor, or another elected official, or you name it, I have the power to choose as an individual what and who I want to listen to, how long I can spend with them, what I can do. It's within my power to make that decision and to own that consequence. And I mean, that's what we have to do, and that's what people have to do. And like I said, maybe because of my past, maybe because of being involved in that stuff that I was involved in as a kid, maybe because I was involved in graffiti, and obviously, you know, people don't love graffiti writers. Obviously, there's a, you know, especially in the 90s.
Oh, I love graffiti when it's tastefully done.
Well, that's it. Well, that's it. But
when the time is taken and it looks good, and it looks like someone sat there and like thought out a process and did something, and I'm like, damn, that's nice. But when it's like 6 lines,
justifiable, even if it's nice, if it's done illegally and without permission.
I'm fine. I'm fine with it. Yeah, I honestly, like, if it looks good, like, yeah, because the thing is, at least from my perspective, when I look at graffiti, yes, you're going to put your graffiti in a spot where it's going to be notable, where it's going to be seen, right? Because you want your art to be seen.
That's the purpose.
You know, that's it. So like when you're putting them in places where, you know, like someone's driving by and they look over and like, oh man, look at that. Like, you know, everyone's like, oh, but when you look at it, you're like, yeah, but they did a good job though. Like, I mean, that's like,
we don't have the same reaction
but when
we
you
drive by the Nike ad.
just like putting like 7 lines and then like whatever and scribbling something, then you're like, dude, that's not that you didn't think that piece out. You didn't draw that piece on like a piece of paper and like, I want to put this somewhere. Like, you literally just wanted some kind of notoriety for putting the littlest amount of effort into something and being like, yeah, that's my tag. It's like, no, you just defaced a wall for nothing. Like, the brick wall looked better than what that looks like. Like, you're not adding anything to that. Come on.
5 minutes of fame. 5 minutes of fame. My approach to graffiti and my mentor's approach to graffiti was always quality versus quantity. There is notoriety in quantity. There is notoriety in quantity for sure. 100%. But if you could achieve the same amount of notoriety through less quantity and better quality, then mission accomplished, because it's less risk. And it speaks volumes to the methodology behind it and the psychology behind the selection of space. And it's a commentary at that point on public space and advertising and all that. But I guess my point to that was, I think that my background in all of those things are, and I mean, it's being a doorman and all of these things, I think is the only reason I can survive and navigate politics, is because my skin is so thick in terms of, I mean, my whole life I've been criticized. I mean, since I was in school, getting tattoos, you name it, in high school, being no good at things. I mean, I'm so used to criticism that for a long time it just deflected off of me and I just ignored it. Mm-hmm. And that was okay. And in politics, I pride myself on listening to those criticisms and hearing them. But I think that if I didn't have that armor, if I didn't have those 25 years, 30 years of baggage and life experience of being criticized and judged, I don't think I would. I don't know if I would survive this time in politics. And I mean, you see people dropping like flies all over the place in politics right now at different levels of government, because it's a lot of stress. And I can guarantee
hard time. Hell's passing over, and you know, I mean, the cleansing is happening. It's getting pushed over.
Well, because groups of people, not everyone, and it's okay that not everyone is cut out to do this.
That's it. And and the one thing I want to say, Sterling, is that I think especially in this time, you know, as to different maybe than when our parents were people, like, you know, were at our age, is I think back in their day, they wanted the idea of being a common man was not such a far-fetched or not such a glorified position as kind of like it is today. Being exemplary at something or being more than human was dignified back in the day. And I think that's kind of what we're fighting is we're fighting an old version of our ideologies where to be the JFKs or the perfect person with the perfect family and everything, to be that pillar of what everyone's supposed to ascertain to, I think was the ideal of what people were going for. And I think now with the advent of the internet, seeing behind the curtain and seeing that, nobody is this perfect human being. Everybody has gripes and problems and situations. I think now what we look for is not the perfect pitch. We don't look for the things. What we want to see is we want to see someone who is navigating life the same way we navigate life, but is willing to admit their faults, see their problems, deal with the bad situations that they've been in, admit and be like, listen, I was a shithead before, but I learned my lesson and now I can get through it. Because, it's like you want to see a story that you can relate to. And I think that's why the majority of people who voted Projet voted for you as well as Valerie, is because when we look at you, we see a real human being. We see somebody who's actually, grown up in the city, been through all levels. And I've always been a person that says, like, who make the best politicians? People who have been to prison, because they know how the system works better than anybody else. They know how things, and they'll tell you exactly what needs to change and what won't. But the fact that you've been through so much and led so many different lives to a certain extent, and that you've gotten into politics, it makes you the perfect person to be in public office, because you can relate to almost anybody, and you can relate to all the people in your constituents that, in your constituency that you're representing. And that if people do have a problem with you, it's not something new for you. I think a lot of problems of what the politicians get is it's a lot of people who deal with business, and business has its own language. Business isn't real life. You know what I mean? Business is like the internet. It has its own terminology. It has its own way of sharing grievances. It has its own way of, embellishing or dictating arguments. That's not real life, and a lot of people don't live in that world. But the problem is that when businessmen come over and be politicians, they bring that language with them. And to them, they think they're being transparent, and they think they're being, honest, and they're doing what's right. And to a certain extent, I guess from their experience, they are. But what they're not realizing for the most part is that a lot of us don't live in that world. And a lot of us, how you're going to cut this business a break, although you see it as a beneficiary to some people, for a lot of us, that's not really what we're looking for. What we're looking for is, what are you going to do about, like, going forward from the pandemic? One of the biggest things for me personally to be voted is I don't really want to hear anything but what you're going to do to beef up the healthcare system. Like, I want to hear, like, how are you going to get doctors back in Quebec? How are you going to keep nurses from transferring out of CEGEP systems onto other provinces, or even going to the States? Like, how are you going to make sure that if this problem happens again, that we're ready to, or we're in a better situation than what we are in now? Because the whole idea of that we're going to minimize the system because we don't really need it is not acceptable anymore, because this is what we're dealing with now. And this is going to be reality going forward, that we've got to understand that, that nature is starting to catch up with us, and that we're not invulnerable. And if we don't have a system in place to better what we're doing and how we're doing it, then we're just going to be falling ass backwards into lockdowns every year to 2 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But all that being said, I got to wrap this up. Unfortunately, I could talk to you honestly for like 4.5 hours, dude. Honestly, you're an amazing person, and you spread a bunch of knowledge, and I appreciate you. But thank you so much for taking this time out. And thank you for all the work you're doing, Sterling, because I know definitely, especially today, it is not an easy job to be doing what you're doing. And I know I hear that you're like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, but I pray that you find the strength to keep doing what you're doing, man, because we need more people like you doing what you're doing, so that a lot of us can stop worrying about, do these people actually have our best interest at heart?
Well, thank you for that, because, like I said, and thank you for doing what you're doing, because by giving me a platform to have a discussion with you is very therapeutic in terms of that, because speaking to people who are my peers, who are people that know where I come from, who have friends in common and things like that, who know the individual and not necessarily just the figure behind the name is important, because I think if more people could have open conversations, and especially in times of stress and moments like we're going through now, it's more important than ever to be able to speak and to wear your heart on your sleeve and to have that conversation. And again, it's I can do this job only with the support of people, and that's because, I mean, if not, it's just me collecting a paycheck for no reason. And I mean, it would be really easy to be in opposition or something again and not have certain responsibilities and just kind of just go through the paces if that's who I chose to be as a person, or something where if I didn't want to have any responsibilities, I could choose very easily not to have any responsibilities, still collect quite a bit of money, and just kind of keep my head down and just do things. But it's not who I am as a person. It's not who I want to be. Every penny I earn is a penny that taxpayers, it comes out of their wallets as much as it comes out of mine and my family's. And I have to make sure that I'm accountable for that and that I'm at their service. So, thanks for the privilege and the opportunity to have these conversations and to have that.
And anytime you want to come back and talk, Sterling, you just shoot me a message and we'll definitely do it again.
Let's do it again in a short period of time, in a couple of months or something. We should do it again to see, like, once, we can do these periodically if you want. Once, in a couple of weeks after the lockdown, in 30 days, maybe, like, after lockdown, let's talk about how the lockdown went or something. Or
for sure.
If you want, let's make this happen, man. Let's make it happen.
For sure. Listen, man, I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Well, like I said, we'll definitely do this again. Where can people find you on social media? I know you don't like it, but
Sterling Downey on Facebook, Seaslington on Instagram. Don't ask me why, but that's the name on Instagram.
Yeah, it's a good name. I like it.
Yeah, it has to do with my graffiti name and everything else. But, so Thurston Howell, the third kind of reference. But that's it. Seaslington on Instagram, that social media, LinkedIn. Just, type in my name. It's not hard to find me, or find out something about me that you didn't know. It's pretty easy.
Awesome. Appreciate it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed this one. This has been the Uncommon Sense podcast. I'm your host, Blake, and this is Sterling Downey. We are